Hi there, welcome to my Ron Ponders video that is being put out in support of the final of my Kickstarter for the 10th anniversary of the Saga of the God-Touched Mage hitting its final stretch goal, which by all means I need to initially say thank you so much. This has been a great project. It is now technically closed, although people can still go ahead and pledge with some of the late pledge features that Kickstarter has put in place, which is fantastic. But it was a great project celebrating the 10th anniversary edition release of my best-selling fantasy series, Saga of the God-Touched Mage. But in the process of putting this together, one of the reasons why this stretch goal came about is that I began thinking about genre in particular around the fact that, number one, I write a bunch of different genres. My other fantastic fun series is, and more well-known series is a science fiction 9-book series, Stealing the Sun, which some of you picked up as add-ons. Thank you for that also. And in the past decade or so, I've been writing and reading quite a bit more eclectically as far as that goes. So genre is something that has been consistently on my mind, right? And I think its history is a little bit interesting, and I am by no means a great historical figure, right? I don't spend hours of my time researching stuff in this particular field. There are only 24 hours a day, and I use mine for doing other things that I find fun. But you know, I am aware that genre was in the conversation as far back as the Greeks and Romans, probably Greeks, I guess. You know, I don't know which philosophers and which whatevers, but I know that's, if you talk to genre people, they go back all the way that far, and which is good for them. Because to me, the main thing that impacts my life was genre growing up as a baby writer in the early 90s, basically, and building my career off of that, is the more modern history of genre, right? And in particular, science fiction and fantasy, because I grew up mostly trying to write fantasy when I very first started, which is probably why Saga of the God-Touched Mage actually exists to begin with. But I quickly moved. I'm an engineer by background, if you know anything about me. I moved pretty heavily into the science fiction field, put a bunch of stuff in analog, and again, my other main series is a space opera, hard science-y kind of political thriller at places. I mean, it's an interesting. I like it. You know, but the bottom line is you quickly start to get a feel for genre as you try to write it, because one of the things you're trying to do is connect up with audiences, and one of the reasons genre exists is because humans constantly are trying to categorize everything, right? There's type A people and type B people, right? Genre A and genre B. There are 6 types of whatever, you know, clickbaity titles, right? The 5 classes of science fiction films. See, there's subgenres inside genres, right? And then pretty soon you get to where you're cutting the subgenres out into things, and then you're mixing and mashing. And I think that has been a story of everything that has been going on within this time period that I have grown up as a writer. And I was thinking about that heavily as I put together this Kickstarter. As you'll see, the you know, even the titles of the stretch goals are, you got fantasy in my science fiction, right, where I put a set of fantasy tropes into an analog story, right? You got science fiction in my fantasy, which is a piece of this last Kickstarter, last stretch goal is going to come with a short story that is set in the Fae world and is very Fae, but it revolves around a analogish kind of a subtrope, right? And so I'm mixing and mashing these things, and I've started to do that quite a bit, and it is great and glorious fun. And it really struck me, and has struck me over this past couple of months, really, because of the term tropes, right? Today, you will often hear people talking about what tropes a book has or a story has or whatever, and they're interested in that. You see the cool little trope charts, right, where you've got a book and all the arrows pointing and, you know, dark, mysterious strangers and, you know, friends to lovers and other kinds of sub-elements. And for me, my path to thinking about tropes as interesting and useful has actually been rugged, because when I grew up, when somebody talked about a science fiction story that was tropey, it was not considered to be a good thing, right? You were using old, tired, worn out pieces of storytelling when the reader base, or at least the elite of the reader base, I'll put it that way, you know, wanted something new and original. And I think that is that mindset that I grew up in caused me to look at the more modern frame of tropes with a little bit of, I'll call it disdain, but that's a little bit too harsh of a term, right? Mostly I just kind of wanted to ignore them. I didn't really care. But it really struck me as I was looking at this piece of work that I did 10 years ago, that I published 10 years ago, and challenged myself to identify the tropes that are in the modern day thoughts and tropes that are in Saga of the God-Touched Mage, right? And I really bounced off of that exercise for half a day or a day, because I don't know, I just wrote it, right? And it is what it is. But then I look back on it, and I really dug through it, and actually as I was going through and doing some of the mushing, right, to move it from 8 volumes into 4, really helped me out in thinking about this, because I could see the things that were in the book, maybe more clearly than even when I wrote it, which is an interesting feeling, right? So I think, you know, the bottom line is the way people are talking about tropes now, right? When you go to a TikTok or a YouTube video, or you hear fans talking about the things in a movie, right, that they really loved, right? You know, they are using the terms much more uplifting, much more positively, right? They are definitely still expecting new and interesting things. You need to be new and interesting. I often will tell people when they ask me about what I think about some kind of a writing requirement, right? What do you need to do from a story structure standpoint or something like that? And my fundamental answer is you can do anything that you want to do as long as you are interesting. If you're interesting, then the reader, viewer, listener, whatever, will carry through anything as far as that's concerned. So I tend to have grown toward the viewpoint of structure less, or meaning more like structure will come out when you're done. When you're finished with the story, you'll say, oh, well, there's the structure of that story. But in the context of genre, you know, there's a lot of conversation in writers write to market or don't write to market, or etc. I think at the end of the day, where we may be coming out is that the term genre is being degraded, being downsized, being relegated into a different bucket. And I believe that's going to be a really good thing for this reason, right? There are people who like, I'm one, I mean, everyone actually is, right? The reader cookies, as people will sometimes talk about, the things that people like to read, the stories people like to hear, the things that make them interested, really should transcend the things that I call genre. I want my readers, as many of them are comfortable, to be able to read Stealing the Sun, which is a space opera-y, hard science fiction thing. I want it to be accessible enough that everybody can read it. And also read Saga of the God-Touched Mage and enjoy them both. And really, they do. Many of them do. In fact, in this Kickstarter alone, there were several backers who not only took Saga the God-Touched Mage in whole, they also took the full of Stealing the Sun. And I think that is a really fantastic and good thing, because, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm beginning to become much more cross-genre eclectic in my reading over the past 15, 20 years, 10 years. As I've noted, I'm reading House of Leaves that my daughter gave me, gosh, probably 3 weeks, a month ago, which is a very, very literary, weird, horror, multi-dimensional, you got to read it to see it. You got to see it to believe it, right? But anyway, I do think that the fundamental aspect of genre, as I knew it growing up, are you a Lester Del Rey fantasy guy? Are you a John Campbell science fiction? Those were the gatekeepers that created the genres. Harlequin was a gatekeeper that created the formula for, anyway, for romance, and still does, right? I believe, anyway. So I think that some of that is going away as readers become more open and start to use the idea of tropes instead of gadgety thing. You know, fantasy, if it has a dragon, it's fantasy. Well, actually today, sometimes, yeah, I mean, by definition, I guess it's a fantastical world. But you see portal fiction with all sorts of interesting cross-knitting of tropes, right? A dragon or a knight used to be a traditional medieval fantasy, but now they're all over. You can have a urban fantasy that brings werewolves and other types of things together, right? And the reason that I think that this is so cool is that, you know, the archetypes in the story, the friends to lovers. If you tell somebody in today's world that this has a friends to lovers story arc, they may be much more willing to pick up a science fiction book that has a friends to lovers story arc than they would just a science fiction book, right? Because they don't necessarily care about science fiction, but they do love friend to lovers story arcs. Or they're in that mood, right? To this week, I want this kind of a thing, right? You see that in the way people are talking about reading all the time. And so I think it is, I am growing more mature toward my viewpoint of what a trope is, because what I think it is basically a fundamental reader love, a reader cookie, a reader, you know, the readers expressing themselves in the way that they want to absorb the world or what they need at the moment, which is fantastic. And I think that also means that this whole concept of being a writer is driven by the idea that readers select writers. Readers, obviously, some fall into categories of they want romance stories or they love thrillers, but at the end of the day, if a reader selects you as a writer they love because you write stories that matter to them, then I think most likely you'll see a lot more crossover, which is really fantastic. I think that's what the world needs. So anyway, I do want to spend some time thanking, again, thank you so much for backing this Kickstarter. It was really a lot of fun to run. There have been a few folks who have agreed to allow me to thank them by name, and so I will thank them by their first names, and they will know who they are, and that way we'll go from there. I want to start with Carrie. Carrie is a person who is, number one, a fantastic writer of her own, and number two, has supported me on several Kickstarters, and I super appreciate that. Really makes a difference to me, so thank you, Carrie. And Johanna, also want to thank you. Johanna, I have run into Johanna several times, and she is just an amazing amazing person. And talking about crossing genres, she does fiction, but really what she does is a lot of nonfiction. and is really, she does fun fiction. I enjoy her fiction, but I think she's a super knowledgeable nonfiction person doing project management kind of things and corporate whatnot. So there is a perfect example of somebody who's crossing over some very interesting things. Michael, again, thank you so much for your support. Again, I'm going to actually break my rule here. Michael Bernstein is a person who has supported me through several things, and I really want to point out that Michael is a person who I grew up admiring. He was in my same cohort kind of time period, and I consider his work to be some of the most brilliant short fiction. If you pick up an analog or three from time, go back, do a search on Michael Bernstein and read some of his short fiction, and it is fantastic. Michael, thank you so much for supporting me. And Amanda, oh goodness, Amanda, thank you for supporting me also. I don't know that, I believe, if I am correct, you are in a job that my daughter would have absolutely adored to have. I believe that you are in theater, if I have you correct. I really appreciate your support on this, and I admire folks who are in the arts, supporting the arts, doing the real work that it takes to put things together. So thank you so much for that. And everyone else, again, thank you. Without your support, this project obviously could not have taken off. We'll be getting some surveys out here to get some more information pretty quickly, and we'll get working on getting you some of these beautiful and fantastic books. I also want to thank Lisa Silverthorne for all of her work, all of her artwork, all of her help in helping me put together the story. She has been a great friend of mine for a long time, and she is a major part of the success of this project. So anyway, there's that. There's my Kickstarter around Ron Pondering genre, and thanks. I will see you soon. Bye.